Time had passed when the queen appeared again, the human who had. Time had passed. Ages, in fact, since humanity had last walked among the stars of this galaxy. For centuries, stories of humans had become legends whispered in alien marketplaces, recounted by historians and adventurers alike. They spoke of a species that had risen against impossible odds, challenging empires, and leaving behind traces of brilliance wherever they had gone. Most aliens treated these tales like myths, simple entertainment for the curious. Yet, in some corners of the galaxy, a quiet belief lingered that humans had never truly disappeared. The signal came unexpectedly. It appeared in multiple star systems at once, subtle but undeniable. Its pattern was unlike anything the alien species had ever encountered, complex, precise, and unmistakably intelligent. Researchers confirmed it carried a human signature, an old-fashioned signature, but one that could not have been fabricated. Across the galaxy, debate ignited. Scientists argued, politicians worried, and historians were mesmerized. The legends were no longer just stories. Humans had returned. Among those who were captivated was a young alien historian named Lyra. She had spent her life studying civilizations long gone, collecting artifacts and deciphering ancient texts. She had grown up on stories of humans who had changed the fate of entire worlds, but she had always assumed they were gone forever. Now, the possibility that one had survived, hidden, even powerful, made her heart race with curiosity and excitement. She knew that if she could find this human, the secrets of the past, and perhaps the future, might be revealed. Lyra was not the only one intrigued. Across star systems, political leaders began to reconsider their alliances and defenses. The human presence, or even the hint of it, disrupted the delicate balance of power. Those who had long ignored the warnings of historians suddenly paid attention. The galaxy was a place built on strategy, negotiation, and fear, and the potential return of humans threatened to tip everything into uncertainty. Far from the bustling cities and political centers, in a hidden and isolated system, a figure moved silently. The human had survived not by hiding in plain sight, but by vanishing entirely, mastering technologies that allowed them to live without leaving a trace. Their life had been long, measured not by years, but by moments and discoveries. They had seen empires rise and fall, watched entire civilizations bloom and fade, and through it all, they had learned patience, strategy, and the art of observation. The arrival of the signal was intentional but subtle. The human did not seek war or conquest. They sought understanding, connections, and perhaps a way to ensure the galaxy would not repeat its old mistakes. They had no desire to dominate, but carried knowledge and skills that could make even the strongest empires pause and reconsider. In their mind, time was no longer measured by calendars or clocks, but by choices and their consequences. Meanwhile, Lyra began her journey. She traveled to distant outposts, studied star charts, and visited archives that had been untouched for centuries. She spoke with retired diplomats, explorers, and former soldiers, piecing together fragments of information that could lead her to the human. Everywhere she went, she sensed a growing tension. The signal had awakened something dormant in the galaxy, both curiosity and fear. Many factions began preparing for the unknown, unsure whether the human would be a friend, a threat, or something entirely beyond comprehension. One evening, as Lyra studied an ancient map etched with star coordinates long abandoned, she noticed a pattern. The human signal seemed to align with the paths of celestial phenomena, moving not randomly, but according to a rhythm she could barely comprehend. She realized that whoever the human was, they were clever, cautious, and deliberate. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, hinting at a mind far more sophisticated than most had imagined. Stories of human ingenuity had never been exaggerated, it seemed. In the archives, she found records of tactics humans had used centuries ago to outsmart entire fleets, to unify species that had never cooperated, and to solve problems that had stumped generations of alien scholars. Lyra's fascination grew into something deeper, admiration. Humans had been underestimated, their intellect and adaptability dismissed, and yet here was evidence that they had not only survived, but thrived in ways no one had anticipated. As the days passed, word of Lyra's discoveries began to spread. She received messages from other historians, explorers, and even officials who wanted to know what she had found. Some urged caution, fearing that revealing too much could provoke instability. Others were eager, sensing an opportunity to align themselves with what could be the most influential being in the galaxy. Lyra herself felt torn. She wanted to share the truth, but she understood that some knowledge carried responsibility, and too much too soon could be dangerous. The human, meanwhile, continued to observe. They moved across the galaxy with care, sometimes leaving traces that were almost imperceptible. They studied alien civilizations with fascination, noting how empires functioned, how technology and politics intertwined, and how fear often dictated decisions more than reason. It had been a long time since they had interacted with others openly, and they knew that even a single misstep could trigger conflict. Yet they were patient, knowing that timing and understanding were more powerful than force. One night, as Lyra gazed at the stars from a quiet observation deck, she felt a sudden shift in the energy of the galaxy. It was subtle but undeniable, a ripple that suggested movement, presence, and intelligence. Somewhere out there, the human was watching, calculating, and waiting. Lyra realized that this was no ordinary being. This was someone who could change the course of events with a single choice. Her excitement mingled with a sense of awe. The legends had been true, after all. The tension in the galaxy grew. Alien factions speculated endlessly. Some imagined the human as a savior, a being who could bring peace or knowledge. Others feared that their return signaled the beginning of chaos. Entire fleets were repositioned, and secret alliances were formed. Meanwhile, Lyra's research progressed steadily. Every artifact, every record, every signal she uncovered brought her closer to understanding the human's intentions. Yet she also realized how fragile the balance was, and how easily fear could turn curiosity into conflict. Despite the uncertainty, one truth became clear. Humans had a way of inspiring others. Even the queen of a distant empire, known for her strict rule and formidable power, had once spoken of humans with a mixture of admiration and wariness. The human's reputation had survived centuries, leaving a mark not through sheer strength, but through intellect, courage, and the ability to unite beings of different worlds. Lyra felt the weight of history pressing upon her. She was witnessing something extraordinary, something that might reshape the galaxy forever. As the first hints of dawn spread across the observation deck, Lyra resolved to follow the trail, no matter how dangerous. She had a chance to see history come alive, to witness the human herself, or himself, and to understand what made them exceptional. She knew the path would be fraught with uncertainty, intrigue, and perhaps even danger. But the call of discovery, of truth, and of human legacy was irresistible. She would go to the edges of the galaxy if she had to, following the signal, trusting her instincts, and hoping that the legends were not only real but alive. Time had passed, indeed. Ages had come and gone, empires had risen and fallen, and yet the story of humans endured. They had survived in ways no one had expected, moving through centuries with patience, intelligence, and vision. And now, as the signal pulsed softly across the stars, one truth was undeniable. The galaxy would never be the same again. Lyra's journey had only just begun. She did not yet know what she would find, whether the human would welcome her, or whether the challenges ahead would test her courage in ways she could not imagine. But she was ready. Curiosity, determination, and admiration drove her forward. Somewhere out there, the human awaited, and when she finally met them, the legends she had studied would take on a reality more incredible than she had ever dreamed. The galaxy held its breath. The human had returned. And with them, a story of ingenuity, courage, and the enduring power of humanity was about to unfold. The galaxy had felt quiet for centuries, yet the subtle pulse of the human's return began to stir even the most distant corners of space. Across star systems, news traveled faster than any fleet. Small factions, scholars, and merchants whispered of a human who had survived, who had returned not to conquer, but to observe and understand. Some were skeptical, dismissing the reports as rumor. Others, especially those who remembered the old tales, trembled at the possibility that the human might appear again. In the heart of an ancient empire, a queen sat upon her high throne, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of nearby systems. She ruled with intelligence and strength, having inherited the throne from a line of rulers who had feared humans for centuries. Yet her curiosity had grown over time, fueled by stories and legends of a species that had once outsmarted entire fleets, outmaneuvered empires, and challenged her ancestors' authority. Now, as the signal reached her sensors, a cold recognition settled in her mind. The human had returned, and she would see them with her own eyes. The queen did not travel lightly. Her ship, a marvel of both speed and defense, glided silently through the void, carrying a retinue of trusted advisors, elite guards, and scholars. The vessel's engines hummed, a sound that spoke of power restrained, not aggression. The queen had long studied the potential of humans, understanding that their strength was not in brute force, but in intelligence, adaptability, and an almost impossible ability to unite unlikely allies. She approached the human not with fear alone, but with caution and curiosity. Meanwhile, the young historian Lyra pressed on. The human's signal had grown more complex, hinting at movement and purpose. Lyra tracked the pattern across multiple star systems, traveling through regions she had only read about in history texts. Each system presented new challenges: gravitational anomalies, unpredictable weather on planets, and territories controlled by factions wary of outsiders. Yet she moved carefully, guided by intuition and the fragments of knowledge she had painstakingly collected. She understood that reaching the human would not be simple, and that every decision carried weight. The human observed from a distance, watching the galaxy respond to their presence. They did not seek confrontation, but they knew curiosity and fear were intertwined, and both could be as dangerous as any weapon. They had studied alien cultures for decades, learning the subtleties of diplomacy, the patterns of power, and the ways in which trust could be both a weapon and a shield. In every signal they sent, every trace they left, there was intention. Nothing was accidental. Lyra finally arrived at a remote system where the signal's intensity had peaked. She maneuvered her small exploration vessel through dense asteroid fields and magnetic storms, feeling a thrill she could not explain. This was a place where few dared to travel, where danger was constant, and yet the human had chosen it as a waypoint. She landed on a barren moon, its surface cracked and glowing faintly under the light of a distant star. The air was thin, and the silence profound, yet in that quiet she sensed the human's presence. It was here that the Queen's fleet arrived, sleek ships cutting through the void with precision. Her advisors were tense, fearing that the human might interpret the arrival as a threat. The Queen, however, remained calm. She had studied humans long enough to understand that intimidation would not sway them. Force alone would accomplish nothing. Instead, she relied on strategy, observation, and patience, traits that had always guided her rule. She intended to learn, to understand, and perhaps even to forge a connection. On the moon, Lyra's scanning devices detected subtle shifts in energy. Something or someone was deliberately masking their presence. The human was close, yet remained hidden, a ghost among the rocks and craters. Lyra's excitement was tempered by caution. She knew the stories of humans' ingenuity were true. Any misstep could alert the human prematurely or trigger misunderstandings that might escalate into conflict. Still, she could not help feeling awe at the thought of finally encountering a being that had shaped history itself. The Queen's lead vessel descended into orbit above the moon. Sensors confirmed the human's presence, though the precise location remained unknown. The Queen studied the readings carefully, her mind calculating possibilities and outcomes. She did not intend to confront the human aggressively. Instead, she wanted observation, conversation, and perhaps negotiation. Her empire had been built on control and intelligence, but even she recognized the value of learning from a species capable of outthinking generations of rulers. The human remained hidden, observing both Lyra and the Queen. They could sense curiosity, fear, and respect radiating from those who had arrived. There was a tension in the air, a delicate balance between possibility and caution. The human considered their options carefully. Engaging now could shift the balance of power across multiple star systems, yet waiting could allow others to prepare, to act, or to misinterpret their intentions. They had learned patience over centuries, and it had always served them well. Lyra cautiously stepped out onto the moon's surface. Her suit's sensors scanned the area, detecting patterns too subtle for the naked eye. She moved quietly, aware that the human was watching. The air was cold and thin, the landscape jagged and barren, yet every step felt charged with anticipation. She had followed legends, signals, and history to reach this point. Now, for the first time, the legend might become real. The Queen communicated with her fleet through a silent network, maintaining control without revealing her exact thoughts. Her presence was formidable yet restrained, a reminder of authority without provocation. She understood the stakes. The human was not merely a survivor but a strategist, a being capable of shaping alliances, altering technology, and influencing the course of civilizations. She felt a mixture of respect and apprehension. This was history in motion, and she intended to witness it firsthand. In the shadows of a crater, the human watched both Lyra and the Queen. Their eyes, reflecting centuries of experience, studied each movement, anticipating reactions and outcomes. They had seen empires rise and fall, species adapt or perish, and yet the patterns of curiosity and caution remained constant. They recognized the human qualities in Lyra: determination, intelligence, and respect for knowledge, and the familiar strategic mind in the Queen. Both were different, yet both reminded the human of the strengths and weaknesses of civilizations across the galaxy. The moon's surface trembled slightly as the Queen's fleet adjusted orbit. The sensors detected subtle energy fluctuations, signaling readiness without aggression. The Queen spoke to herself softly, a habit of focus and reflection. She did not know the human's intentions fully, but she understood enough. Patience and observation were as important as strength. Her ancestors had underestimated humans before, and she would not repeat their mistakes. Lyra finally glimpsed the human, not through eyes, but through the subtle manipulations of energy in the environment. It was a presence that could not be ignored, calm yet commanding. Her heart raced with excitement and awe. She knew she was witnessing something extraordinary, a being whose intellect and strategy had shaped entire civilizations, now moving silently among the rocks and shadows. She felt the weight of history pressing upon her. The human's voice was calm when it finally spoke, though its source seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I know why you are here," they said, their tone neither threatening nor welcoming, simply acknowledging. Lyra froze, realizing that the legend had become real. She was in the presence of a being whose life had spanned centuries, whose knowledge surpassed the understanding of most civilizations, and whose decisions could alter the fate of entire star systems. The Queen, observing from above, activated a secure communication channel. Her voice carried authority tempered with respect. "We do not seek conflict," she said. "We seek understanding." She was careful, knowing that any misstep could provoke suspicion or hostility. Her empire had feared humans for generations, yet now she felt the possibility of learning, of connection, and perhaps even collaboration. The human considered both the historian and the Queen. They weighed the intentions, the potential consequences, and the possibilities of engagement. They were patient, strategic, and deliberate, knowing that their presence alone was enough to change the course of events. Yet they also recognized curiosity and respect as qualities worth nurturing. "Then we begin with understanding," the human said. Their words carried a quiet power, a reminder that intellect and wisdom could inspire more than force ever could. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, her excitement mingled with nervousness. "I have studied your history," she said softly. "I never thought I would meet someone who lived it, who shaped it. I want to understand, to learn." Her words were sincere, carrying the weight of admiration and humility. The human studied her, recognizing the spark of intelligence and respect, qualities that had always defined their interactions with other beings. The Queen's presence remained steady, a silent reminder of authority tempered with restraint. She watched as the human interacted with Lyra, noting the calm confidence, the strategic awareness, and the subtle power that required no display of force. She understood why humans had been underestimated for so long. Their strength was not physical alone, but mental, social, and visionary. The galaxy had forgotten, but she would remember. The first contact had been made. The human had emerged not as a conqueror, but as a teacher, observer, and strategist. Their presence shifted the dynamics of the galaxy subtly yet profoundly. Lyra felt awe and anticipation, realizing that the story she had studied for so long was now alive before her eyes. The Queen understood the stakes, recognizing that patience, observation, and respect would be key in this unprecedented encounter. The galaxy, silent and vast, seemed to pause. In this moment, time felt suspended. A human had returned after centuries, the Queen had arrived, and a young historian had witnessed history firsthand. The possibilities were endless. Alliances could form, knowledge could be shared, and civilizations could be inspired. Or misunderstanding and fear could lead to conflict. Yet for now, there was curiosity, respect, and the quiet thrill of discovery. The human observed both of them, patient, calculating, and aware. They understood the ripple their presence created and the choices that lay ahead. They had returned not to dominate but to inspire, to teach, and to guide in subtle ways. The galaxy would respond, as it always had, with caution, curiosity, and awe. And somewhere deep in the void, the pulse of human ingenuity began to weave its quiet influence across the stars once more. Time had passed, yet the human story was only beginning to unfold again. The Queen had arrived, the historian was engaged, and the galaxy watched with bated breath. What would happen next was unknown, yet one thing was certain. The human had returned, and their presence would change everything. The galaxy had grown tense. Rumors of the human's return had spread far beyond the quiet system where the historian and the Queen had first encountered them. Traders, explorers, and military commanders all whispered in private corners, unsure whether the human was a friend, a threat, or something entirely beyond comprehension. Among the whispers, one thing was certain. Humans had always been underestimated, and now the galaxy was about to remember why. The human observed from the shadows of a rocky outcrop on the barren moon. They did not move quickly, nor did they reveal themselves unnecessarily. Centuries of survival had taught them that caution could be as powerful as any weapon. Their eyes, sharp and reflective, traced the movements of ships in orbit, the small sensors and scanning drones sent by curious alien fleets, and the lone figure of Lyra as she meticulously recorded everything. Each gesture, each adjustment in equipment, told the human volumes about the intelligence and determination of the beings around them. Lyra's admiration for the human only grew. She had studied their past achievements, reading accounts of battles, strategies, and alliances that no alien had expected humans to master. Humans had once led small groups to victory against overwhelming odds, uniting species that had long been enemies, and developing technologies that changed the rules of conflict. The historian had always imagined these deeds as heroic tales, exaggerated over time. But now, standing on the moon, she understood that the stories were only partially complete. The human had lived these moments, seen the consequences firsthand, and learned from each challenge. The Queen, meanwhile, maintained a careful watch from her fleet above the moon. Her advisors remained nervous, urging caution, but she relied on experience and instinct. Humans, she had realized, were unlike any species she had ever ruled or faced. Their strength lay not in force alone, but in vision, adaptability, and intellect. She remembered the accounts of her ancestors, who had sought to control or destroy humans and failed. The lessons were clear: underestimate them at your peril. The Queen herself felt a mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity. As Lyra and the human observed one another, subtle traces of past encounters surfaced in the human's thoughts. Memories of their previous journeys, of empires they had influenced or avoided, replayed vividly. They recalled the fleet commanders who had dismissed humans as primitive, only to be outmaneuvered in ways that had seemed impossible. They remembered the diplomats who had underestimated human insight, the scientists who had scoffed at human creativity, and the allies who had been inspired by humanity's courage. Every memory reinforced one truth: humans were never truly powerless, and their presence could change the course of history. The human decided it was time to test the intentions of those who had sought them. They subtly adjusted the energy fields on the moon's surface, creating faint signals that could be detected by sensors. Lyra noticed immediately. Her eyes widened as she realized the signals were deliberate, controlled, and intelligent. She felt a thrill she had never experienced before. Here was a being capable of communicating without words, of demonstrating mastery over technology and nature simultaneously. Every small gesture was meaningful, and she sensed that the human was judging her as much as she was judging them. The Queen observed these interactions from orbit, her mind analyzing patterns and outcomes. Humans, she had learned, were patient and calculating. The human's silence was not weakness, it was strategy. Each observation, each subtle movement, was designed to understand intentions, test character, and gather information before action. The Queen appreciated this, even if it made her nervous. She had met rulers and strategists before, but none had approached conflict and curiosity in the way humans did. The tension escalated when small fleets from nearby systems arrived, drawn by the same mysterious signal. They approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Some sought diplomacy, others feared the human might represent a threat or a challenge to their authority. The human remained hidden, analyzing the fleet's formations, communication methods, and technology. Even from a distance, they could anticipate likely outcomes, predict reactions, and plan responses that would require no aggression at all. Their strategy relied on intellect and timing, not firepower, and it worked perfectly. Lyra recorded every detail, understanding that history was unfolding before her eyes. She realized that this human was not only surviving, but influencing events without direct confrontation. They were using knowledge, observation, and subtle control to shape outcomes. The historian felt both awe and urgency. The galaxy had always remembered humans for their courage and intellect, but few had witnessed it firsthand. She was learning that humans had a power that transcended fleets, weapons, and empires, the power to inspire, guide, and transform. The Queen decided to make a cautious move. She communicated with her fleet, instructing them to hold position and maintain non-threatening behavior. She herself considered the human carefully. The beings on this moon were not to be underestimated. The human's presence, though unseen, radiated authority, intelligence, and a quiet strength. She recalled her ancestors' mistakes, the moments when humans had outwitted empires and rewritten the rules of engagement. She would not repeat those errors. Respect, patience, and careful observation were her tools now. The human allowed subtle interaction, revealing traces of intelligence through the environment. Patterns in energy, micro-adjustments to gravity fields, and controlled emissions of light and sound created signals that could be interpreted by those who were perceptive enough. Lyra detected these changes immediately, understanding them as intentional. She realized that the human was communicating without words, testing comprehension, and assessing character. Every step she took, every observation she made was being measured. The Queen's advisors were unsettled by the human's indirect methods. They suggested aggressive action, fearing that subtlety might conceal danger. But the Queen ignored them. She had learned that aggression would only provoke the human, and that intellect and observation could achieve results far greater than force. She reminded her fleet that patience and understanding were as important as readiness and defense. The human's strategy would be met with respect, not suspicion, and engagement would proceed only on their terms. Meanwhile, the human recalled previous interactions with alien civilizations. They remembered how patience, clever planning, and knowledge of culture had allowed humans to survive and influence outcomes without open conflict. They remembered how alliances had been forged with those who had initially been enemies, how challenges had been overcome by intellect and adaptability rather than violence. These lessons, learned over centuries, informed their approach now. Every signal, every subtle interaction, was a careful calculation meant to reveal intentions and capabilities without provoking unnecessary risk. Lyra felt the thrill of discovery intensify. She realized that humans had never relied solely on strength to survive or lead. Their greatest power was intelligence combined with observation, strategy, and the ability to inspire cooperation. In every signal she detected, she sensed wisdom, caution, and vision. She understood that this human was a living legend, a being whose influence could ripple across star systems in ways few could comprehend. The Queen, too, recognized the human's brilliance. She noted how their presence alone commanded attention, how every subtle signal was meaningful, and how patience and strategy could achieve more than fleets of ships. She understood that humans were not conquerors in the traditional sense. Their power lay in foresight, ingenuity, and adaptability. Respect for their intellect became her guiding principle, shaping her decisions and interactions. As the fleets maintained distance, the human allowed a single controlled signal to reach Lyra more clearly. It was a message, subtle but unmistakable, designed to test understanding and perception. Lyra interpreted it immediately, sensing intelligence, caution, and an invitation to approach carefully. She felt both exhilaration and reverence. This was not just a being observing them, it was history alive, teaching without words, guiding without dominance. The Queen, observing this, realized that humans were capable of shaping events without force. and that influence could extend far beyond immediate interactions. She appreciated that their methods relied on intelligence, patience, and perception rather than aggression. In her mind, she began to reconsider previous assumptions about humans, understanding that their power was subtle yet profound. The human was not just a survivor. They were a strategist, a teacher, and a unifier in ways few species could ever hope to achieve. The human allowed more signals to reach the observers, each carefully calculated, revealing knowledge and insight while maintaining safety. Lyra began to understand patterns of thought, strategies, and subtle lessons embedded within these signals. She realized that the human's presence was teaching her, preparing her, and guiding her understanding of history, strategy, and human ingenuity. She felt honored to witness such intelligence firsthand, and her excitement grew into determination to record and share this knowledge. The Queen, recognizing the depth of human strategy, began to consider her own next steps. She saw that patience, observation, and careful engagement could achieve more than force. She reflected on centuries of encounters with humans, recalling victories and losses, lessons and errors. She understood that history had underestimated humans not because of weakness, but because their methods were different, subtle, and enduring. Their power lay in intellect, adaptability, and the ability to inspire loyalty and cooperation. The human observed both Lyra and the Queen, considering intentions, intelligence, and potential for collaboration. They had survived centuries by understanding cultures, predicting reactions, and using intellect over force. Now, they assessed the future, knowing that the galaxy's response would determine outcomes for generations. Their presence alone inspired change, demanded respect, and ignited curiosity. The ripple of their influence extended far beyond this moon, reaching fleets, factions, and civilizations across the galaxy. Time seemed to slow as the three observed one another, the human, the historian, and the Queen. In the quiet tension of the barren moon, the potential for understanding, collaboration, or conflict hung in the balance. The human had survived not through conquest but through intellect and strategy. Lyra had followed history to witness it. The Queen had arrived, aware that patience and respect were essential. Each played a role in a story that would shape the galaxy once more. The human allowed one final signal to reach them clearly, a subtle invitation to approach cautiously. Lyra recognized the meaning immediately, her heart racing with anticipation and awe. The Queen acknowledged the significance, understanding that this was a moment of history unfolding. The galaxy waited silently, holding its breath as humanity's enduring legacy revealed itself once again. Centuries of legends, stories, and whispered myths had led to this moment. The human had returned not as a conqueror, but as a strategist, teacher, and catalyst. Their presence was proof that intellect, courage, and vision could surpass fleets, weapons, and empires. The historian felt privileged, the Queen aware, and the galaxy would soon witness the profound impact of human ingenuity and persistence. The humans stepped forward, finally visible. Their presence radiated calm authority, intelligence, and quiet power. Lyra took a cautious step closer, filled with excitement, reverence, and determination to learn. The Queen maintained a poised observation, recognizing the significance of the moment and the lessons humanity could teach. The galaxy, vast and silent, seemed to lean in, awaiting the next chapter of a story that had begun centuries ago and was only now returning to life. Time had passed, yet the humans' influence endured. Their presence inspired reflection, strategy, and possibility. The legend was alive, teaching the galaxy once more that humanity's ingenuity, courage, and patience were unmatched. And as the first steps toward understanding and collaboration began, one truth became clear. The human had returned, and with them, the galaxy would never be the same. The barren moon seemed almost alive as the humans stepped fully into view. They moved with quiet confidence, every gesture precise and deliberate. Lyra felt her breath catch as she took in the presence of a being whose reputation had crossed centuries. This was the human who had inspired tales, outsmarted fleets, and united species that had long been enemies. And now, here they were, watching her, studying her, as though every thought she had was part of a larger equation. The Queen maintained her position in orbit, observing silently. Her ship remained cloaked in the shadows of the moon's thin atmosphere, its sensors carefully calibrated to detect any sign of threat. She understood that the human's calm demeanor was not weakness. Every movement, every glance carried intention. They were a strategist, a thinker, a being who could shift the balance of power across the galaxy without ever firing a weapon. She respected them, even as a tension she could not name coiled in her chest. The humans spoke, their voice steady and even. "I have observed you both," they said. "I know your intentions and I can sense your potential. Neither of you are here by accident. The galaxy has brought us together for a reason." Lyra felt a thrill as she realized the human was addressing not just her, but the queen as well, acknowledging her authority while also measuring her motives. The words carried weight, intelligence, and an authority that did not demand obedience but commanded respect. Lyra stepped closer, her curiosity burning brighter than fear. "I've studied your history," she said softly. "I never imagined I would meet you. I want to understand how you survived, how you influenced civilizations, how you saw the galaxy differently." She felt the human's gaze, sharp yet not unkind, as if weighing whether she was worthy of their time. And in that moment, she realized she was witnessing not just history, but living strategy in motion. The human nodded subtly, acknowledging her words. "Observation is the first step," they said. "Understanding comes next. Action follows only when it is necessary. Many civilizations have sought to control or eliminate me because they did not understand the methods humans use. I have survived because I learned to adapt, to anticipate, and to act with precision." Their tone was calm, yet the authority behind it was undeniable. Every word carried the weight of centuries. The queen activated a secure communication link with her advisors, though she spoke only to herself. "This is unlike anything we have faced," she murmured. Her mind raced, calculating possibilities. Humans were not like other species. Their power did not lie in weapons or fleets alone. It lay in intellect, strategy, and the ability to inspire cooperation across cultures. She remembered the mistakes her ancestors had made, underestimating humans repeatedly. This time she would not fail. The human turned their gaze toward the queen, as if recognizing her authority and experience. "You have observed humanity from a distance," they said. "You have studied our influence, yet you underestimate the subtlety of our methods. Strength is not always in firepower. Influence, strategy, and knowledge can change outcomes far more effectively than force." The queen felt a shiver of respect. This being had survived centuries not through domination, but through intellect and vision. Lyra watched, fascinated, as the interaction unfolded. She realized that the human was teaching, even now, demonstrating the principles that had allowed them to endure. Observation, patience, and careful engagement were tools just as powerful as fleets or weapons. The human's methods were subtle yet profound, requiring understanding and discernment from those who would interact with them. Lyra felt honored to witness this firsthand. The human continued, their gaze sweeping the barren landscape, as if accounting for every detail. "I have learned to observe patterns," they said, "to understand intentions, to predict actions before they occur. This is why I have survived while empires rise and fall. Intelligence, not aggression, has always been the human advantage." Lyra nodded silently, impressed by the clarity and simplicity of the statement, even as its depth was immense. The queen considered her response carefully. "Humans have always been underestimated," she said. "And yet you survive. You influence events without confrontation. Your methods are unlike anything I have seen. How can I trust that your presence is not a threat?" The human regarded her thoughtfully, their calm demeanor unshaken by the question. "Trust is built over time," they said, "but fear can be dispelled by understanding. You will see that my intentions are not conquest or domination. I act only when necessary and then with precision and thought. Observe and you will understand." Their words carried conviction. Lyra felt that every syllable was measured, designed to teach, guide, and demonstrate insight. The queen allowed a pause, reflecting on the truth of the human's statement. Patience had always been a tool of leadership, yet few species understood the power of intellect in shaping events. Here was a being who embodied that principle perfectly. The queen realized that to underestimate them now would be foolish. Instead, she would observe, engage, and learn. The human then turned their attention fully to Lyra, as if acknowledging the historian's role in this unfolding story. "You seek knowledge," they said. "You have followed signals, read histories, and pieced together fragments of understanding. You are not here to fight or control. You are here to learn, and that makes you an ally in observation. Lyra felt a thrill of recognition. The human had seen her efforts, judged her intentions, and deemed her worthy. The barren landscape seemed to hum with possibility. Even the Queen's fleet, held in careful orbit above, seemed to move with a new sense of purpose, influenced not by orders but by the subtle presence of the human. They had shifted the dynamics of the system without raising weapons, proving that intellect and strategy could have effects far beyond immediate perception. Lyra understood that this was the essence of humanity's enduring power. The human allowed a slight gesture, a movement so subtle that only the most attentive observer would notice. Lyra detected it immediately. Energy fields on the moon's surface shifted, revealing patterns that hinted at previous human interventions in the region. Hidden technologies, carefully preserved data nodes, and markers of observation. Lyra realized that the human had been here before, quietly influencing events in ways that left no immediate trace but had long-lasting impact. The Queen observed the subtle shifts with her sensors, her respect for the human growing. This was a species that operated on a different level, combining foresight, strategy, and patience to influence civilizations. She realized that humans were not just survivors. They were catalysts for change, beings whose methods could alter the course of history without confrontation. She adjusted her approach accordingly, emphasizing observation, understanding, and careful engagement over immediate action. Lyra began to understand the depth of the human's influence. Every signal, every pattern, every subtle shift in the environment was deliberate. The human was teaching without speaking directly, demonstrating principles that had guided them for centuries. Patience, intelligence, observation, and the ability to inspire cooperation across differences. Lyra felt honored to witness this, and she began to record every detail with meticulous care. The human allowed another subtle demonstration. Energy nodes embedded in the moon's surface pulsed faintly, revealing data streams that contained historical records, strategic analyses, and insights into civilizations long gone. Lyra realized that this was a gift, an invitation to understand not only the human's past, but the methods that had allowed them to endure. The historian felt awe, knowing that she was witnessing history in motion and gaining insight that few beings would ever experience. The Queen, observing this, understood that the human's methods were about subtle influence rather than overt control. They demonstrated leadership through strategy, foresight, and understanding. She considered her own empire, its strengths and weaknesses, and realized that engaging with humans required respect, patience, and careful observation. Any attempt to dominate or control would be futile. Instead, collaboration and learning offered the greatest potential. The human then addressed both of them simultaneously, their voice calm and measured. The galaxy is vast and time is long. Understanding precedes action. Observation informs choice. Intelligence guides strategy. Fear is the enemy of clarity. Learn these principles, and you will see why humanity endures where others falter. Lyra and the Queen felt the weight of these words. They were not merely advice. They were a demonstration of centuries of experience distilled into a lesson that could shape future decisions. Lyra felt a spark of determination. She realized that her role was not passive observation but active learning. Every detail mattered, every gesture carried meaning, and every interaction offered insight. She knew that the human's presence was an opportunity unlike any she had encountered, a chance to understand not only the past, but also the principles that had allowed humans to survive and thrive. The Queen nodded subtly, acknowledging the wisdom in the human's approach. She realized that patience, observation, and strategic engagement were far more powerful than immediate action. Her fleet remained in orbit, silent yet vigilant, understanding that influence often required restraint rather than force. The human's presence had reshaped the dynamics of the system without firing a single shot, and the Queen recognized that this was a demonstration of intelligence beyond measure. The human allowed one final subtle display. Energy fields shifted in patterns that illustrated historical strategies, demonstrating how humans had united species, outmaneuvered fleets, and influenced empires without open conflict. Lyra watched in awe, understanding that every movement, every calculation, and every decision had been guided by intellect and foresight. The human had survived, thrived, and shaped history through observation, intelligence, and strategy rather than aggression. The barren moon seemed to pulse with quiet significance. Lyra felt that she was witnessing not only a living legend, but also the essence of what had made humans extraordinary: their ability to adapt, inspire, and influence across cultures and civilizations. The Queen, observing from above, recognized the strategic brilliance of the humans' approach and understood that their presence would continue to shape alliances, influence decisions, and inspire others for years to come. Time seemed to slow as the three shared the quiet moment. The humans' presence had shifted the dynamics of the system, demonstrating that intelligence, patience, and foresight were more powerful than fleets, weapons, or authority alone. Lyra felt privileged to witness this lesson, and the Queen recognized that engaging with humans required respect, observation, and strategic thinking. The galaxy, vast and silent, seemed to lean in, anticipating the next chapter of a story that had begun centuries ago and was only now returning to life. The human finally spoke again, their voice calm yet commanding. The future is shaped by understanding, by observation, and by intelligent action. Influence comes not from force, but from foresight and collaboration. Those who learn this will endure. Those who do not may falter. Lyra and the Queen absorbed the meaning, recognizing the truth of the statement. Humans had survived for centuries not because they were strongest, but because they had mastered the art of strategy, patience, and insight. The first steps toward collaboration had begun. Lyra realized that she was witnessing not only history, but the principles that could guide future civilizations. The Queen acknowledged the humans' authority, recognizing that respect and careful engagement offered greater opportunity than dominance. The humans' presence had demonstrated that influence, intellect, and foresight could reshape the galaxy without a single act of aggression. Time had passed, yet humanity's story continued. The human had returned not as a conqueror, but as a strategist, a teacher, and a catalyst. Lyra felt inspired, the Queen felt challenged, and the galaxy would soon witness the profound impact of human ingenuity, patience, and wisdom. And as the first steps of understanding and collaboration took root, one truth became undeniable. Humans endure, adapt, and inspire, shaping the galaxy in ways no other species could. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. After centuries of silence, after tales reduced to legends, the human had finally returned, and their presence had already begun to reshape the balance of power. The barren moon had become a meeting point, not of conflict, but of understanding. Lyra watched the human with awe, her heart racing with every subtle gesture, every careful display of intellect. The Queen observed from orbit, her mind alive with calculations and possibilities, realizing that she was witnessing not just history, but the shaping of a future none could have predicted. The human addressed both of them directly, their voice calm and precise. "We face a galaxy that has forgotten some truths," they said. "Intelligence, strategy, and cooperation endure where aggression alone fails. What we do here now will ripple outward. Our choices matter." Their words carried centuries of experience, distilled into a message that both inspired and commanded attention. Lyra felt a thrill. This was more than history. It was a living lesson in wisdom and leadership. The Queen activated her fleet's communication systems, allowing a broader view of the moonscape and the surrounding space. She understood that the human's influence extended far beyond the barren surface. The patterns of energy, the subtle signals, and the hidden networks demonstrated a level of strategy that dwarfed anything her empire had accomplished. She realized, with a mixture of respect and apprehension, that engaging directly with the human required not just observation, but collaboration and careful thought. Lyra stepped forward cautiously. "I want to help," she said. "I've followed your signals, studied your history, and now I see the methods behind your survival. I want to understand and perhaps share what I learned to guide others." The human regarded her with a calm, appraising look, weighing her intentions, her knowledge, and her willingness to learn. Finally, they nodded subtly, acknowledging her role. "Your understanding is key," they said. "Knowledge must be shared carefully and guidance given with thought. You have the potential to be a bridge, connecting ideas and species in ways that can shape outcomes without force." The Queen observed this interaction closely. She understood that Lyra's role was more than academic. It was strategic. The young historian was now part of a dynamic that could influence alliances, inspire trust, and prevent conflict across multiple star systems. She felt a renewed sense of responsibility. The human's presence demanded a new approach to diplomacy and engagement, one that relied on intellect, patience, and the careful nurturing of relationships rather than threats or displays of power. The human guided their attention to a series of subtle signals embedded across the moon's surface. Hidden data nodes pulsed faintly, each containing centuries of accumulated knowledge, strategies for conflict resolution, and insights into civilizations that had long vanished. Lyra's eyes widened as she realized that the human had preserved this information not for domination, but for guidance. The lessons were meant to be observed, understood, and applied, not wielded as weapons. The Queen acknowledged the significance. She understood that these networks and signals represented a philosophy that humans had perfected over centuries. The use of knowledge and strategy to influence outcomes, inspire cooperation, and prevent unnecessary conflict. The human had survived by understanding not just technology or tactics, but culture, psychology, and the nuances of interstellar interaction. It was a lesson that even empires, powerful and ancient, had often ignored. Lyra began to record everything meticulously. Each data node, each subtle pattern, and each demonstration of strategy was precious. She realized that she was witnessing principles that could guide the galaxy into a new era, principles grounded not in force, but in understanding, intelligence, and foresight. The human had returned not to conquer, but to teach and influence through wisdom. This was the essence of human strength, and Lyra felt privileged to witness it. The human then directed attention to a nearby asteroid field, a location that had been historically considered dangerous and impassable. Subtle adjustments in energy fields made traversal possible, revealing hidden pathways and resources. Lyra marveled at the ingenuity. The human was demonstrating not just survival, but the ability to create opportunity where others had seen only risk. The Queen recognized the significance immediately. This was a display of human creativity, adaptability, and problem-solving, qualities that had always made humans extraordinary. A message arrived from distant fleets observing the system. They reported anomalies in the energy fields and a few attempted unauthorized approaches. The human did not panic. Instead, they allowed the Queen and Lyra to see the patterns, explaining without arrogance that control and understanding were more effective than confrontation. Force will provoke resistance, the human said. Strategy and clarity can prevent conflict before it begins. Lyra realized the depth of this lesson. Humans did not merely react, they anticipated, guided, and influenced outcomes without aggression. The Queen's fleet maintained formation, observing and absorbing the human's methods. She issued instructions with care, demonstrating a willingness to learn from a being centuries beyond her initial understanding. Patience, observation, and thoughtful engagement were now the tools she relied upon. The human's calm authority radiated without intimidation, teaching through example, and the Queen recognized that this approach could prevent wars, inspire trust, and reshape interstellar diplomacy. Lyra approached the human directly. "How do you do it?" she asked softly. "How do you survive, influence, and guide without using force?" The human considered her, their eyes reflecting centuries of knowledge. "Observation first," they said. "Understanding next. Intelligence shapes strategy. Patience allows perspective. Influence is earned, not demanded. These principles endure across time, space, and species. Learn them, and you can guide outcomes without raising weapons." The Queen observed the exchange with renewed insight. She recognized that the human's philosophy was applicable not only to individuals, but to empires. Empires often relied on force and dominance, yet the human had demonstrated for centuries that intellect, foresight, and strategy could accomplish far more than aggression. She began to see a new path for her own rule, one where knowledge, diplomacy, and understanding would shape alliances more than fleets of warships. The human allowed Lyra to access the hidden data nodes fully, revealing centuries of strategy, interstellar navigation, and conflict resolution. Lyra realized that the human had preserved knowledge not for personal gain, but as a guide for those who would act wisely. The lessons were subtle, requiring discernment, intelligence, and respect. Lyra felt the weight of responsibility. She would carry this knowledge, interpret it, and share it in ways that could influence civilizations without conflict. The queen acknowledged the value of these lessons. Her empire had long relied on strength and authority, but she understood that true influence required insight, patience, and strategic guidance. She began to consider reforms, new alliances, and methods for engaging other species based on understanding rather than fear. The human's presence had illuminated a path that was as practical as it was visionary, and she felt compelled to follow it. A small fleet from a neighboring system arrived, initially uncertain and wary. The human did not react with hostility. Instead, they allowed the queen to engage with the fleet using the principles they had demonstrated: observation, communication, and intelligence. The outcome was remarkable. Misunderstanding was resolved without conflict, and alliances were subtly shifted in favor of cooperation. Lyra realized that this was a practical demonstration of the human's philosophy. Intellect and strategy could achieve what fleets and weapons could not. The queen's respect for the human deepened. She had witnessed centuries of alien politics, military campaigns, and diplomacy, yet she recognized that the human's methods transcended traditional approaches. Patience, observation, foresight, and subtle influence had created outcomes she had never thought possible. She began to see that leadership was not only about authority, but about guidance, understanding, and the cultivation of trust across cultures. Lyra continued to document every detail. She understood that she was now part of history, not as a passive observer, but as a participant and recorder. The human had returned not as a conqueror, but as a strategist, a teacher, and a guide. Every lesson, every demonstration, and every interaction offered insights that could shape civilizations for centuries to come. She felt inspired, honored, and deeply aware of the responsibility she now carried. The human's gaze shifted to the stars beyond the moon. They considered the vastness of the galaxy, the centuries of civilizations that had risen and fallen, and the possibilities that still remained. Their presence had begun to reshape alliances, influence decisions, and inspire hope. Lyra understood that this was only the beginning. The human had returned not to control, but to guide, not to dominate, but to demonstrate the enduring power of intelligence, strategy, and cooperation. The queen transmitted a message to her fleet, emphasizing the importance of observation, restraint, and strategic engagement. The human's influence had altered her approach to leadership, showing her that wisdom and foresight could achieve far more than force. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, recognizing that collaboration, understanding, and intelligence would guide her empire into a new era. Lyra approached the human one final time, her voice filled with both admiration and curiosity. "Will the galaxy ever be ready for what you bring?" she asked softly. The human regarded her calmly. "Some will be ready," they said. "Others will need time. Influence is subtle, patience is essential, and wisdom endures where force fails. Humanity has survived because we understand these truths. Others will learn or they will falter. Time reveals the capable." The queen, observing the exchange, nodded in quiet agreement. She understood that the human's return had already begun to shift the galaxy. Knowledge, patience, and strategy had proven more powerful than fleets or weapons. She would carry this lesson forward, guiding her empire with respect, foresight, and intelligence. The galaxy would not forget the human's influence, for it was subtle yet profound, shaping events in ways that would last generations. The barren moon, once silent and lifeless, now seemed charged with significance. Lyra felt the weight of history pressing upon her, yet also the thrill of opportunity. She had witnessed a legend alive, understood principles that could guide civilizations, and participated in a story that spanned centuries. The human had returned not to conquer, but to inspire, guide, and demonstrate the enduring strength of intelligence and vision. The human's presence radiated calm authority, a reminder that true power lay in understanding, observation, and strategic influence. Lyra understood that her role was to carry these lessons, to interpret them, and to share them responsibly. The queen recognized the practical and philosophical significance of the encounter, understanding that patience, foresight, and collaboration would define a new era of leadership. Time had passed, yet humanity's influence endured. The human had returned not as a conqueror, but as a teacher, a strategist, and a catalyst. Lyra felt inspired, the queen felt enlightened, and the galaxy would witness the profound impact of human ingenuity, patience, and wisdom. Alliances were subtly reshaped, misunderstandings resolved, and the seeds of a new era planted. The stars beyond the moon pulsed with possibility. The human had returned, demonstrating that intellect, strategy, and foresight were more powerful than fleets, weapons, or authority alone. Lyra and the Queen had learned lessons that would guide their decisions for generations. The galaxy would never be the same, for the human's presence had proven that humanity endures, adapts, and inspires across centuries and star systems. And as the first steps toward a new era unfolded, one truth was undeniable: humans had returned. Not to rule, not to dominate, but to teach, guide, and shape the future through intelligence, patience, and vision. The galaxy watched, inspired, and forever changed.